Hello again, Tom, the well-traveled American. I know it's been about a week. I haven't forgotten about everyone. Uh, I I must be honest that I'm just not going to produce videos um, without a full understanding of what's going on. Simply repeating uh, mindless gibberish that's been fed out to the world for various propaganda and other agendas is not what I'm here trying to do. I'm trying to provide the best clarity I can on some things that are pretty complicated. Uh, right now, as we know, there's a major conflict going on, and it's been 14 days or so now, 15 days over in the Middle East. There's a lot of news blackouts from the countries themselves that are directly involved, a lot of satellite data suppression, and an enormity of propaganda that has been spread by everyone you can possibly imagine. So, bearing that in mind, I'm going to try and, after I've tried to sift through this stuff, try to bring forth the points that are actually provable, shall we say, actual reality. As we know that the United States and Israel has had enough of the foot dragging and the stalling and the outright lying of the Iranian regime, and they have indeed struck. So we'll cover some of the rationale behind that towards the tail end, but right now I want to kind of just get some of the raw data out of the road, so to speak. Iran has attacked all of its neighbors. Whether they were directly involved in this or even tangentially involved in it, uh, they aren't. Some of these countries have not launched any attacks on Saudi Arabia, or excuse me, Iran. Uh, and also, although there may have been American assets in those countries, they were not used in any attack profile on Iran. For example, the Saudi Arabian country has not allowed military from the United States to utilize their forward bases there. Actually, there are no forward bases actually in Saudi Arabia. There's just some presence on some Saudi bases. The UAE said no, you cannot utilize the two bases that are there in the UAE to attack Oman. There's nothing there to speak of that we have. Kuwait did not authorize. Iraq did not authorize. Jordan did not authorize. So yeah, Iran decided they were going to take it out on these countries um, just because there were some Americans that may or may not have actually been there on those territories. And where they did attack some of those assets, most noticeably in Bahrain and Qatar and the UAE, United Arab Emirates, they also decided that they would attack other targets which had nothing to do with this, such as civilian population centers, high rise apartments, notable buildings, oil storage terminals, pipelines. The Iranians have decided that they are going to involve the entire world, whether the entire world wants to be involved or not. Uh, they even attacked a base, a British base up in Cyprus. And the Brits clearly came out and said, nope, we're not going to let you use any of our forward areas to launch any attacks or be involved in any attacks. And the Iranians did not care. They've declared war against basically the entire Western world. And big surprise? No, not to me. No. Um, I spent 10 years in Dubai, which is, less than 100 miles from Iranian territory, and spent 10 years there and pretty familiar with how everything works over there. So Did I believe that the Iranians would attack these other countries in a terroristic fashion? Absolutely. Of course they were. It was always preordained. In fact, my criticism of the Omanis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, the Bahrainians, the Kuwaitis, the Saudis, the Jordanians, and the rest were that you are never going to be an innocent bystander in this. Iran was not going to let that happen. Despite your best intentions from your country's end to remain neutral, it was never going to happen. That was a delusion at best. So, that in mind, let's look at a few other things here quick on the map. The actual large view, as they say. Now, this data was now, because of the blockade on information that comes out with any credibility, is almost a week old now. I have a slightly more updated map we'll come to in a minute. This was on day 8 of the war, so we're at day 15 now. So there we are. We can see in blue the attacks made by the Israelis in the United States were quite numerous. Many, many. Then we have the countries that were attacked, or territories that were attacked by the Iranians. So we look at what's been hit here. There are a great number of targets that were hit. By estimation now, we're well over 15,000 15,000 targets that were actually individual targets that were actually hit in Iran. So that's quite a few, and we'll see the result of that here in a minute. The Iranians, though, have not been standing idly by. They've made their presence known also in the battle space. They have attacked the UAE. They have attacked Oman. They have attacked Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq. Not on the map here at this time. They attacked Azerbaijan. They attacked Turkey. They attacked Syria. They attacked Jordan, Lebanon, Cyprus, and Israel, of course. So quite a lot. They have also managed to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. I'd like to agree with President Trump, but I'm going to have to beg to differ here. The strait is closed. A handful of internationally flagged ships, ships with not a registry of the United States, Israel, or anywhere else, have attempted to transit the Strait of Hormuz, and they've been attacked. Some of them have been set on fire, and I believe one of them's been sunk at least. It's not happening. People are not going to stick their neck out there, and in fact, the proof of that is the United States Navy hasn't gone into the Persian Gulf at all. We're remaining off in the Gulf of Oman, out there beside this territory, because the reach of Iranian drones, Iranian missiles in some cases, and sea mines, Iran has managed to get a few of those out into the water, have made it pretty much a no-go zone. That is, if you want to stay afloat, as they say. So that's the overview here as of about a week ago. Little more updated map. This is only about 5 days old, this map, and we can see that things have changed a little bit. This map is interesting in that there's a few other things I'd like to talk about here that are important to the rest of the world. You'll note that the Suez Canal is marked out. Also, the passage on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait down in the entrance to the Red Sea is outlined, and also, of course, the passage through the Strait of Hormuz. There's more than oil that goes through those straits. There's a great deal of international commerce that goes through there, both directions. And the chart here kind of spells out to us what the levels of those are and what they are. And I'll have another chart where I'll break this down just a little bit further. We're going to look at outgoing commodities, mostly oil, but not exclusively. And then we're going to look at incoming commodities. And we're also going to look at percentage of desalinated water per state here. That's the little graph that's made in the blue vertical bar, which is in each country. And you can see that Iran only has a vulnerability, shall we say, in outgoing commerce. Uh, Ingoing commerce, trade coming in, is very little effect to them as far as that goes. They're not much grain shipped, and they don't have many desalinization plants to attack, to put pressure on the regime, of course. Uh, Meanwhile, the other Gulf state countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman, Iraq, all of them have a very high, with the exclusion of Iraq, have a very high percentage in water provided to their population, both military and civilian, through desalinization plants. These are very vulnerable types of targets. Even to smaller drones can shut that stuff down. You're just dealing with piping and tanks and such, wherein the piping and tanks are generally not flammable as you would find in an oil refinery. They're still pretty easy to disrupt with smaller munitions. So the concern of the Gulf states is fairly realistic there when Iran starts targeting these things, and they have. In fact, the only attack that I am aware of that was made by the UAE in response to the severe amount of attacking by Iran into their infrastructure, the only actual attack made by the United Arab Emirates in return was that they attacked as they call a mirror type of attack, Iranian desalinization plants. But as you can see by the graph, that makes almost no dent in their water supply. By the way, Iran has a serious water supply problem, but it's not because of a lack or destruction of their desalinization plants. Okay? As you can see, a proportion of wheat imported, shall we say, through the strait is not very much for Iran. They have land corridors up through Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, those parts of the countries to provide the wheat into their country. They import by ship under half, wherein Oman, UAE, Qatar, Iran, Kuwait, they're all up at pretty near 100% of their foodstuffs, such as wheat and grains, coming through the strait. So that is a weakness that Iran is seeking to cash in on. Saudi Arabia also imports the vast preponderance, about 85% of their foodstuffs come in by shipping also through the various straits that are vulnerable. Okay? So these are things that have to be taken into consideration if traffic can be stymied or stopped through the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Suez Canal. This is a problem for all of the Gulf state and adjoining countries. So there we are. That's reality. Has to be dealt with. I would say if I had a criticism of our war plans so far, we did not take into account that the Iranians would be able to cause as much havoc as they have in these straits, effectively shutting them down. Doesn't take much to shut them down. You strike a few ships and everybody else runs scared. And I could certainly understand that. as a Marine, when I was stationed on board an aircraft carrier, my biggest worry was not anything that I probably should have been worried about, but what I did worry about is the ship being struck, and I was stuck on a burning ship. That was my concern. I didn't worry about the actual things that I probably should have worried about, which was landing the aircraft at night on a pitching deck. That was the real concern I should have been focusing more of my attentions on, but it was not. All right. Let's do a quick look at where we have U.S. controlled bases in operation for at least 15 years in red and other military presences. As you'll notice, in Saudi Arabia, we have no base in Saudi Arabia as Americans. We're not really welcome there on a large-scale basis. Jordan, Syria, Iraq. No, we have some troops and some things there, but they are at a very smaller level. Indeed, Cyprus, we don't have any base there. We latch on to a few aircraft parking spots that the British military has up there. On the other hand, we have several bases in Kuwait as a result of the Iraq-Kuwait wars, the Gulf Wars 1 and 2 that were fought decades ago now. We maintain a presence there because the Kuwaitis are wanting us to be there in a larger fashion. Bahrain, the same way. Qatar, the same way. And the United Arab Emirates, we have actual larger scale base operations there. By the way, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, none of those countries, Oman, Saudi, none of those countries authorized any striking using military assets of the United States from within their borders. So they tried to play the neutral card, and it hasn't worked out. It does not surprise me. So there we are. That's a little dissertation there, a little description of where we have troops and equipment on the ground to one degree or another. Let's look at the results. Let's go through the numbers here. And this is actually an up-to-date slide here that I have, data that I finally got that I could kind of trust here a little bit. As of Sunday, March 15th, March 15 at 6 o'clock in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. In other words, pretty fresh data. Total U.S. military killed so far, 13. Injuries, 140 to 150. And by injuries, I mean some of these are grievous injuries, and some of them are basically, I had a few scratches and bruises here and there, small things. Israel, 15 killed, 3,138 injured due to the strikes by Iran. Still not many killed, but a great number of injured there. Oman, 3 killed, 15 injured. UAE, 6 killed, 141 injured, which is fairly remarkable considering they have attacked some civilian-type infrastructure there quite a bit. Qatar, 16 injured, considering the amount of strikes that were done there. That's pretty amazing. Bahrain, 2 killed, dozens injured. Saudi Arabia, 2 killed, 12 injured. Kuwait, 6 killed, dozens injured. The strike there was one of the larger ones that actually caused some deaths. Jordan, 28 injured. Iraq, 27 killed. Big strike on a northern base there, Erbil, which was fairly effective for the Iranians. Lebanon, interesting. 826 killed. This was inflicted by Israeli airstrikes primarily on Hezbollah. Cyprus, there was no killed or injured up there, but Iran did attack the British military base there, the airfield up there, and caused some equipment damage. And then over on the far end here at the extremis of the right top, Iran, 1,444 killed and 18,551 injured. The bulk of those were military targets. There was some collateral damage, is the polite term for when you accidentally blow up some civilians. Uh, that happens. It is a war. And we can play semantics with all of these words as much as we want, but it's a war. People die. People get hurt. People get killed. That's why we try and avoid it as much as possible, as it's pretty dangerous for people, pretty tragic. Uh, a lot of the Iranian top uh, military and mullah group have been indeed killed, and many more have been injured. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit also. Um, so that's basically the breakdown of what's going on there. Um, Here's a little bit bigger view of trade in the Strait of Hormuz, and you can see from the graphic here, as I was explaining here a little earlier, that the desalinization is listed in the blue bar graph, the wheat or foodstuffs in the kind of orange graph, and the stripy, black and gray stripy is the desalinization. And we've already talked about that. I just thought I'd let you have a little closer look at some. I'll zoom in so you can look at the graph yourself. Let's talk about some of the bigger overarching things that have we have pretty good data on here. As of March 15, 2026, U.S. military presence in the Middle East is at its highest level in decades, with nearly 50,000 personnel deployed across the region, including aviation assets primarily and naval assets. Not really that much ground troop stuff going on, although the United States has decided to send a Marine expeditionary unit along with its carrier ship and its supporting naval assets into the area, about 2,500 Marines. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with them as of yet, because in order for them to debark the ship with anything other than small equipment, those can be put in on a helicopter, an aerial assault type of thing from a fair distance. But to get heavy equipment in, you're going to have a proximity of, I don't know, 30 miles or so offshore. Even that's an enormous distance to have to travel in a landing craft and those sorts of things. Really, realistically, you're looking at like 10 miles or so to make that type of a landing. So I'm not sure what we're going to do. There's been talk because Karg Island, which is all the way off the coast north and east of Bushehr, Iran. You can see on the map there, there's shirts further inland, Bushehr on the coastline there. That we bombed the other day. We supposedly did a pretty good bombing raid on that island. The island has its significance in that 95% or so of Iranian oil is transited through that island. That's really the point where the piers are, where the loading of the tankers takes place for Iran. So would it be a target that you could want to take over in a fairly clean fashion? We could land Marines there and they could certainly control that island 100%. However, fair warning, I'm old enough to remember what Khe Sanh was in the Vietnam War. Marines had an outpost up on a hill in Vietnam, and the Viet Cong surrounded it in the jungle at a distance, and then proceeded to launch numerous artillery and rocket attacks on there, putting everybody in the base at great peril. We lost people there. The other thing is, how do you get the amphibious assault group past the Strait of Hormuz and up into the Persian Gulf to where it can be done. Uh, I would think a more likely usage would be to put them ashore down in the Strait of Hormuz, but even that is a pretty risky game there too. And I don't know what advantage we get from that really. I mean, it's 2,500 troops, not that much, believe it or not, even though they are Marines. Um, there's limitations there. Um, I'm gonna jump back to a wider view here. Oops, let me just back up a little bit here. There we go. Just to cover a few other things here. Turkmenistan has declared like permanent neutrality. Azerbaijan has talked about taking retribution against Iran for a missile strike on a school up on their territory. Yet to see anything happen in there with that. Same thing for Turkey. They've talked a little bit since there were Iranian drone attacks on their soil about, hey, we can attack if we want to, more or less. Uh, no one else has done any direct attacking there so far. Egypt and Yemen have also remained neutral, just something to look at there. Iran has been preparing for this conflict for decades, learning from the past wars and perfecting the art of asymmetrical tactics. And we see that being put into play. Like it or not, that's happened. We have performed a pretty intense decapitation strike on the Iranian government, and they're still wanting to have a big fight. Okay. So, therefore, the U.S. Israel conflict here with Iran is a multifaceted type of war at this juncture. It's not a straight up normal conventional war due to its asymmetric nature. Deeply complex, significant regional and global implications, which we talked about. The trade that goes through those straits is a global strategic concern, economically, political dimensions among them evolve, making this a critical area in the globe that is now focused because of certain realities. Much of the world's, well, not much, but 25% or so of the world's oil transits out past the Strait of Hormuz. And that's a big thing, not so much in the United States directly, but China and India and Japan and Korea. And most of those Asian countries get like 90% of their oil out of the Strait of Hormuz. So, yeah, you want to talk about having huge economic impact? Well, there it is. Lessons from conflicts in Ukraine and Israel emphasize that drone suppression requires a layered, high-speed, cost-effective ecosystem rather than a single silver bullet type solution. Wow, nobody could be prouder than I am of the United States. We've got some military technology that's just unbelievable. Yeah, but when you shoot down a $20,000 drone with $1 million Patriot missile, that's not sustainable. It's not logical, it's not reasonable, and it's certainly not working out the way we want it to. We could have learned from Ukraine. We could have learned from the Nagorno-Karabakh war between Azerbaijan and Armenia before the Ukrainian conflict came along. And the lesson that I really think that we've just turned a blind eye to, which is fascinating to me, is for decades, Israel has been under attack by Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, and other Iranian proxies adjacent to their territory. Israel consistently has attacked those entities for decades, and they haven't solved the problem yet. Asymmetric warfare with drones and rockets and missiles and mortar rounds. The techniques that we have developed in the West to combat those have proven to be, at best, partially effective. Defenses must use different tools for different altitudes, different price points. Yes, war is an economic thing. Using multi-million-dollar missiles to shoot down the 20,000 drones, it's not economically sustainable even by the United States. Direct energy weapons, newer microwave systems, like an Israeli laser system, the Iron Beam, partially effective. Yes, that's a more cost-effective way, certainly. Being fast-tracked now to provide a near zero cost per intercept, short range. These are short range. Anything that's involving lasers and microwaves, these are what we call point defense, very short range. The missiles, the drones are already in the air. And there is a difference between the three things. We're talking missiles, we're talking drones, and we're talking the difference between ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, and how you counter those two are dramatically different. As we find out, drone interceptors. Ukraine has been pioneering in using homegrown, Ukrainian developed and built interceptor drones to ram or shoot down enemy drones, UAVs, achieving a high success rate, over 70% in some areas, at a fraction of the cost of missile-borne systems. That is the new high-tech part of a proper drone umbrella. The low-tech is reaching back to the 1960s, autocannons mounted on mobile platforms that are radar controlled. Once again, these are point defense type defenses where it's much cheaper to shoot down a drone with a handful of 20 millimeter shells from an autocannon than it is to try and shoot them down with some drone missile. The big advantage now is from Ukraine is this layered defense type of thing where they have involved many, many different tools to try and effectively curtail the drone attacks in their country. Large fixed defense sites are vulnerable to saturation and precise targeting. Boy, could have taken that lesson to heart, eh? We lost the giant radar array, which cost, I don't know, $500 billion or some astronomical amount of money. It was struck by some drones and a missile, and it's done. We just flushed that money right down the old toilet. And it was a saturation attack. The point defenses were overwhelmed. We didn't have much point defense there to begin with, apparently. Not enough to cope with the threat. And the Iranians were able to take out a huge prize there monetarily from the United States. Lesson in that is avoid centralized locations of things. Use mobile dispersed teams that reposition constantly to avoid being located and jammed by electronic intercepts, and also targeted themselves. It's what we call counter battery fire in the artillery world. There's also a necessity for bottom-up capability. Effective suppression must now exist at the squad or the platoon level. This gets into ground operations more so, but equally well for other targets, rather than being a high-level command asset, a loose network instead of a top-down command, is what has been proven most effective over in Ukraine. This includes portable jamming drones, detectors, and other things at a lower level to where you have a network that takes care of these sorts of problems because we're dealing with saturation here. We're also dealing with the fact that there's a huge decentralized command structure in Iran. We've already decapitated most of their command structure, but yet they're putting up a pretty good fight. They have effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz. They have effectively curtailed international trade through that body of water. So, kind of go ahead here a little bit. Let's look at what we have accomplished. Iranian ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones launched at the United Arab Emirates, which is where a lot of these were taking place between February 28th and March 13th. So it's a pretty current look at things. And we can see that there is a trend line here wherein drones and ballistic missiles at the onset of this war were quite a lot. Now, looking March 3rd, all the way at the right-hand side of the chart, by the way, this is from the Institute Study of War, a reliable source of data, we can see that we have pretty much pinched off all of their cruise missiles. They really haven't had that many cruise missiles, which are difficult to shoot down, but not completely difficult. And they're high. These are high value or high cost targets. Yeah, use those Patriot missiles and things on those because they're like $1 million missiles themselves pretty much. So that makes good sense. You're dealing with high cost and low numbers there. Makes sense to use high-end equipment to get rid of them, high-end systems. Ballistic missiles, they're pretty pricey themselves. We have THAADs, terminal high altitude systems. In fact, when I was in the UAE, there was one stationed right down the street from where my little office was. Yeah, makes sense to use high-end equipment to get that solved. The big thing with the ballistic missiles, the big tapering off in that is we've actively gone out and hunted them down over there in Iran. You're not going to see a ballistic missile being launched from the back of a Toyota pickup truck. That's not the way it works. So there are targets that are more easily identified and eliminated on site before they even get them in the air. That's the real way to deal with that threat, and I can see that we've made big inroads on that. Still not complete, though. The bigger problem is going to be in the future here. I'm fairly confident we're going to track down the remainder of the ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. We're going to reduce that number to near zero. I don't know if we'll ever get to zero, but we're going to get pretty close. The big problem is really the drones. The drones are not easy to hunt down at the launch site because you're dealing with the back of a pickup truck, somebody's basement, the corner barber shop, whatever. They haul it out on the street and put it on a stand, and away it goes. Gonna be hard to actually eliminate all of that. But that's where your layered point defense comes in with your old-fashioned 20 millimeter or so radar-guided mobile gun platforms, and equally important, if not more important, new technologies, microwave jamming, laser jamming or shooting down capabilities, and more importantly now, as we found out over in Ukraine, the actual utilization of cheap, plentiful, widely dispersed, and locally controlled drones to shoot down the other incoming drones. That's a system that seems to be working pretty well, and everybody seems to be interested in it. Other than the United States, for some reason, I guess we're too stuck up to to go there, which is really not a good look. I mean, it's hubris that we need not be involved in. It's not productive. So that being said, That's what we're looking at right now. Where are we going to go from here? Not quite sure. But I do know one thing. We're going to have to get the Strait of Hormuz opened back up, the Red Sea passage through the Bab el Mandeb Strait secure, and of course maintain the openness of the Suez Canal in order to put global commerce back on a reasonable footing. That has to happen, and it's got to happen pretty darn quick because otherwise we're going to have a problem. Because if we allow the Iranian hierarchy there to continue this, they can stand on their head for a long time and shut all that down and cause havoc economically throughout the entire world. Which gets me to my final point. What's the real solution here? Is it logical to assume that we can hunt down every drone or we can defend against every drone? Is it logical to assume that we can hunt down every missile? No, it's not. It's not going to happen. The answer is never. So that means what are we going to do to fix the problem? Because civilian shipping is not going to want to go through the straits and risk the possibility of getting whacked. They're too risk averse for good reasons. So how do you solve this problem? I've thought about this for a while. If anybody else has any better ideas, please let me know. Post it up. Let us all know. We can ask for it to be done. The only answer I can come to is that we have to eliminate the people who want to continue with their miscreant behavior. That means all those who are in charge over in Iran who want to continue with this attacking of civilian shipping have to be removed. They have to go away. If they don't want to change, they have to go away. So more decapitation strikes are going to be necessary to actually finish this up. You just can't get around it. And they're not going to make it easy. And they're going to probably secrete themselves inside civilian targets. There's going to be collateral damage. The question is, do we have, as the West, the stomach to deal with that collateral damage? That's the real question right now. Really, that's pretty much the only question. And I would say that I'm not sure if we do. We should. If we actually want this to end in a positive note, we're going to have to hunt these people down. They're going to have to be coerced. However much force is necessary to do that coercion is up to them. This can stop tonight. It's on them. And for those of you who would say, oh, but it's a war crime. No. It's a war crime on their part. You're not allowed to put your rocket launcher inside a church. You're not allowed to put your missiles inside a hospital. That's against the rules of war. And if you don't want to fight within the rules of war, then we have to stop fighting with a hand tied behind our back. That's just the way it works. So I'm going to leave it there. It is indeed 15 March, and this has been long, but I think that I've finally had some clarity of thought and some data that was worth sharing with everybody. So I am indeed at this juncture out of there.